welcome to episode 22 of the Good Game Roundtable podcast. I'm Lin Jie Kong, and this is part 5, the penultimate episode of Humans of Good Game, a series on the podcast filled with individual interviews with everyone on the team. We're celebrating Good Game's 10th anniversary this year, so I thought what a better time to ask everyone about their experiences working on Good Game. Later on the show, we'll drop in on Hex, but first, I think something quite special. I sit our long-serving sound recordist Grant Roberts down for a long and languid chat about his esteemed career, the production process, and why sound is often neglected. So relax and get a cup of tea ready. So, I think we're good now? We're good now, Grant?
I think we're okay now.
Okay, so Grant and I have just spent the last 10 minutes actually redoing all the settings on the recording, because supposedly I've been doing it wrong the last 18 interviews I've done. Thanks, Grant. We should have done this as a first interview. So you could have properly taught me how to record something as a professional rather than an almost professional that I am, right? Grant, our long-suffering sound recordist, how are you?
I'm fine. Thank you, Lin Jie.
So I just wanted to ask the first question is, was the first thing we worked on the piano thing with Warby? Were you on that?
Yes, I was.
Yeah.
Which was Warby's last shoot and your first shoot as director.
Yeah.
I can remember you from before that, though.
Oh, no, I was hanging around before that.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, it's never polite to ask someone how old they are.
Right,
But are you able to tell us how long you've been at the ABC?
Oh, no, I've been at the ABC very, very short term in ABC terms. I've only been here for 13 odd years. But prior to that, I was a freelance sound recordist for 25 years prior to that. So I got to the stage in my life where I thought, I think the idea of a full-time job is pretty good. So that's why
in particular at your national broadcaster, right?
I can absolutely assure you, national broadcaster, because I used to do a lot of relatively high-end docos, and I found that towards post 9/11 that things started really, really dying off in the proper documentary sense, and I could see less and less work occurring. And whenever I used to work before, I would work for overseas for, say, 3 or 4 months and then come back here to Australia. I would immediately ring the ABC and say, "Hi, guys, I'm back. Any work as a freelancer?" And the ABC was splendid enough to give me lots and lots of work whenever I was back in the country. And the ABC made the only what I would call proper learning shows on free-to-air TV. So they were the ones who were doing the science programs, the documentaries, stuff that had a bit more meat to it than what we normally see on the commercial free-to-air stations.
So tell me a bit about some of the projects you've worked on previously.
Look, I used to put on my CV that I've been lucky enough to work with the absolute richest people in the world, say ex-Habsburg Empire people, the Rothschilds.
Only the best.
Only the finest. All the way down to the most extraordinarily humble people in absolute poverty in third world nations. And funny enough, it's the people in the third world nations who are the most hospitable. They're the ones who are the fastest to invite you into their home. They are the ones who will starve themselves even further just to feed you. The humanity of the poorer people in Africa or China or Vietnam or the Philippines or South America is just extraordinary. Yes, the Rothschilds, they're okay, but they're not tending to give you too much, that's for sure.
Well, that's how they build an empire.
That's
by
how
saving.
They have their money. That's right.
First rule to having money, don't use the money.
Keep it.
Right. Did you always think that you were going to go into the media growing up?
No. Look, I mean, as a little boy, all I wanted to do was to become an archaeologist. That was my greatest dream. And in the end, it finished up that I didn't go into anthropology or archaeology, but I've been lucky enough to work on many digs around the world, working with some of the finest anthropologists in the world.
And you didn't have to do the dirty work.
And I didn't have to do the dirty work.
It's the best part of it.
We just turned up, did the filming, and went back to our comfy hotel.
And you got to see the good parts of the archaeology.
Got to see all. It'd be sort of cut to the quick version. Prof, I've got a plane to catch type of mentality. So, sorry about the mic tap. We got to the dig at the right time, just as they're brushing away the last bit of dirt to, lo and behold, find whatever, some magical item.
So, I mean, I like calling you what I term an old school nerd, right?
Yep. Because
you were so into technology, and most people wouldn't think that if they saw you on the street. But no, I'm just saying you're very regal.
Oh. Lin Jie, you'll have to cut that one out.
But where does this fascination with technology come from?
Look, I mean, there's actually photos, well, there used to be photos at home of me sitting on the grass, totally naked, when I was probably maybe about 6 months old, in Nedlands in Perth, back in the very early 50s, with what's called a folding ruler in my hand. Now, that's the sort of thing that carpenters use and people like that, and it's a fold-up ruler. I had apparently an endless fascination with breaking them. And I also had an endless fascination with machinery. So our perfectly good 4-stroke lawnmower that we had as kids, I decided to pull it apart. Too bad I couldn't get it back together again. The same thing happened with clocks, all sorts of things. So it's always been there, that desire to see how things work.
So a tinkerer. A tinkerer, from a very early age.
Yeah.
So you've been in the industry a very long time, and you come across this show called Good Game. What was your first memory of Good Game?
First memory of Good Game would be going out to somewhere, it was the end of the M2, just about where the M2 joins the M7 for you Sydney-siders, and we went to somebody's house there to do a review on this thing that was a plastic guitar that had no strings on it. And that was, of course, Guitar Hero, and it was Guitar Hero 1. And that was first intro. So that was working back in the days of Junglist, as I call him, not Jung. And what was his name?
Kapowski?
Kapowski, yeah, Kapowski. Now, I think it was the both of them that were there on that day, but we did... Actually, no, it was only Kapowski, and we did him arriving on a scooter. So it was early days of Good Game, so it was this sort of arrival shots. So that was, and it was Janet who was directing it. So that was my first memory of Good Game.
And old school shooting on P2 or shooting on Digibeta?
We would have been shooting on Digibeta.
Wow, yeah. Old school.
Tape.
On tape.
Yeah.
On tape.
Well, it's still better than film.
What was it like shooting film? Film is fun.
No, film is absolutely superb. Is a much more structured thing. You have to know what you're doing beforehand, because the cost of raw film is prohibitive relative to the cost of tape or the cost of hard drives or whatever.
Do you think expertise and skill level has gone down these days because of non-linear and video?
No, I don't believe skill levels have gone down. They've just changed. So it's fine for, curmudgeons like myself to talk about the good old days, but there is no way, whenever you compare something, if I compared something that I would have seen being shot, say, in mid-1980s, compared to how it looks on TV now, compared to something that we do on Good Game and how it looks on TV, it is totally chalk and cheese. I don't care what the film people saying. We were shooting on, say, on a 12-month doco series I did. We were shooting on film. We were shooting on negative. We would come back and look at we'd go overseas for months on end, come back and spend 2 or 3 weeks looking at all the rushes. And I can absolutely guarantee you that what we were seeing in 4:3 format projected onto a large screen looked mediocre. Yeah, this is before a colour grade, but it still looked mediocre compared to our normal stuff that we shoot on a daily show like Good Game, on a daily basis.
That's very comforting, Grant. Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah.
So you come across this little weird show called Good Game.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think?
Oh, I thought certainly it had. I thought coming across Good Game, I most certainly thought that there was a real need for a show like that, because games. I was aware of computer games to quite a large degree. I was sort of playing around the edge of them back in the 70s, and I knew that heaps of people actually have a love of computer gaming. Myself, I don't. I really have no time for it. And I don't mean no time. Myself personally, I find that I would prefer to be doing other things.
But you've played it in the past. You've played many games in the past.
Look, do you know where I started? I started on this game called Pong.
Old school.
And real old school, and the nerdry coming out of me. In those days, there was a one chip that would play about 6 different TV games, because there were no computers as such. And it was one chip, and I still remember the name of it. It was an AY38500 series. And that produced 6 games: Pong, soccer, squash, can't remember the others. And it was just the paddle up and paddle down. I mean, all the listeners to this can remember what Pong was. I built that. You could build that yourself. All it needed was that one chip, which you could get from Dick Smith's, I don't know, probably for about $5 or something like that, and a handful of other components. And I built that game. So I was most certainly aware of the attraction that games had to people. But myself, as an example, I did so many stories on LA Noire for Good Game in the build-up to the introduction of it, and I thought, this is actually a game I'm going to buy. So I went out and bought a PlayStation, and then I bought LA Noire, also that I thought that I could get into computer gaming. Yeah. Got to the first fight sequence, and I thought, no, I don't actually understand this.
Yeah.
So that's it for me.
I remember when I went from a Nintendo 64 controller to a dual analog controller.
Yep.
Because I kind of skipped PlayStation and Xbox. I was always a Nintendo fan, so the console I had after the 64 was the Wii, and the Wii didn't really have dual analog unless you bought that special controller. And then until I got my Xbox 360, which is still quite recent, that was the first time I actually got to dual analog, and that was a huge span of years of like, oh, this is a thing now.
Yep.
How do I do this? Too many buttons. What? So I could totally understand, going from something quite old school into suddenly a PlayStation 3 is a bit daunting.
I think it's possible because I'm not sure that there's going to be that many people who are in their 60s who are into computer games. I think it requires a mental switch. You tend to have a set of locked-in operations that you feel that is such a huge learning curve to switch over to a controller type system. Yep. And I think probably the best example is for the listeners who who this mother or grandmother or somebody like that picks up and uses a computer mouse for the first time.
Yep.
It's a pretty sad event to watch. And that's how we were all like that at one stage. But when you're younger, you have a much quicker ability to be able to work out that the movement of the hand doesn't actually need watching that hand moving to see what's happening on the screen. To me, that's the same. That's how I would think that the controllers are, except that I haven't been able to get into that disassociation between my hand movements and what's happening on the screen.
Do you think the intuitive touchscreen controls have changed that a little bit? Because like my mom was never really into computers. Like she used computers in the old days when she was learning BASIC and all that stuff as part of an engineering course. But nowadays she has an iPad and she gets a touchscreen component. She still doesn't use a PC or a laptop or anything. But for her, that touchscreen is like that window to this whole new technological environment. Do you think it's going to get easier, like, with VR? And
I think it will most definitely get easier with new technology. Augmented reality, I think, is going to have enormous influence on our day-to-day lives. Virtual reality, I think, as we've all seen, has got limitations.
Have you had a go at it yet?
I've just put on the headset just for a very short space of time, but I know myself I get motion sickness very, very quick. And I've seen how quickly Stephen reacts to it. And even Stephanie, who seems to have a stomach like a stainless steel drum, even she reacted to the last game that we were reviewing. So I think that's a bit of a way away yet. But augmented reality is just extraordinary. But back to what your mum's gone into computers. And I would suggest that that's possibly because she's actually making the physical link between her finger on the screen and what occurs as a result. Yep. I think there's still, for a lot of people, there is a difficulty between having your right hand down at your side with a computer mouse, moving that around, and there's something occurring on the screen. That disassociation is quite difficult for a lot of people.
In the physical and the spatial, I guess, recognition.
Now, here's early on in my film career, because I had a career basically on the technical side before that, uni, all the rest of it, and I didn't actually get into the film industry until 1979. And around about 1979 or 80, I can't remember, there was a pop song in Australia called Space Invaders, and I'm pretty sure it's probably still available on YouTube. And I did the pop clip for that, because in the sound side of things, when you're doing a pop clip, you do this stuff called sync playback. And so I did the sync playback on that. It was done in a cafe, and it's sort of a Space Invader type arcade machines in a coffee shop in George Street. And that was my first introduction to Space Invaders. And I'm sure, I can't remember the name of the group, but I'm sure it's still around there. Look for it. Space Invaders, the song, the Australian version of it. Yeah. It's pretty... because I know I can still remember that song after all these years. It is so bloody boring.
Well, we'll have to go on YouTube and look for it now. So 10 years on Good Game, on and off, along with other things, shows and projects here and there. Wow, did you think we'd get here 10 years? It's a long time in television.
10 years is a really, really long time in television. If you think of the science programs, towards 2000, that would have probably only run for maybe about 5 years. Its follow-up was Quantum. That probably only ran for maybe 10 years or something like that. And its follow-up, Catalyst, it's probably only done about 10 years as well. So 10 years for a television program, we're starting to look into the realms of play school.
Yeah. Oh, geez, 25 years, Grant.
Well...
Or more than that, I think.
But what I find really interesting is that what we're going through now is a real learning curve for the filmmaking process for doing virtual reality games. There's a lot of people here working really, really hard to try and have the best way of trying to convey the full experience of virtual reality across into a two-dimensional realm, i.e. TV. And that has a lot of problems, because when I come in here and look at games in the room that we're recording in now, I know that they're seeing things in 3D, but all I'm seeing on the screens when we're doing the review on the game just looks okay, but it doesn't look anything fantastic. So it's really difficult to convey the sense of reality across into a two-dimensional field. And I think that's... We've got a bit of a way to go there, but I think we're certainly heading in the right direction. And I would suggest if there's any show in Australia that can do it, it is this show that's going to be able to do that.
We've got the expertise behind the camera. So what has been some of your most memorable and favourite moments that you've worked on at Good Game?
At Good Game? Look, I think probably some of the most memorable occasions are, for me, as a non-gamer, are the little role-playing games that we did. For instance, the Mafia one we did a couple of weeks ago, where it's Hex and Barjo and Goose. And they're great little things to do. And then in the past, we've done our version of True Detectives, our version of X-Files, and some of those little things where on the smell of an oily rag, we're making something that actually looks pretty good on television. Yeah. And that's the whole art of of trying to get a show that the whole show just runs with such a low budget, but being able to actually produce stuff that is actually pretty good.
Yeah. You know, the interesting thing is I've talked to people, and I've done talks to, people in the tech side. And when I talk about television and say we're a really low budget show, and then I tell them roughly what the budget is, and they're shocked at how much money it is. And then I try and explain, it's like, well, do you understand how much it costs to make a TV show or to make a film or to even make a game? It's a lot of manpower. It's a lot of hours. It's not like you sit down and you write an article, you know? And that's not to say writers don't work hard. I think the writing process is some of the most difficult things that you could do. But it's an expensive thing. You know, your entertainment, you know, whatever you do when you sit down on the couch and you watch or you play, these are expensive things. These things take a lot of people to put together, you know?
Yeah, look, I think that not too many people have the understanding of that television and the film industry, anything that is picture involved, moving picture involved, is hugely expensive, because you've got two ways of doing it. There's actually, we have the rule of three in the film industry, which is cheap, fast, and good. You have to give up one of them. You cannot make a good quality thing fast and cheap. So you've got to give away one of those items every time. And the television just gobbles up money. And I mean, when you think of a drama set, you will very often have perhaps 70-odd people who are directly involved with the acquisition of the raw material. So that's not the actors, but that's your electrics, that's your grips, that's your camera people, that's your soundos, that's catering, that's producing, that's directing, that's wardrobe, etc., etc. There might be, I mean, I've worked on films where there's been 120-odd people, as not including actors, and they're not working, unfortunately, according to executive producers, they're not working for peanuts. They all actually have a mortgage to pay. So it's hugely expensive to make. But the returns, of course, you know, that's why you've got to, if you want a return from your product in the long term, then you've got to throw money at it. Yeah.
Well, it's like any investment, right? It's like it's not going to work if you throw pennies at it. I mean, we have the luxury on the show that I think a lot of us take on, you know, many roles and many hats in what we do.
Absolutely.
Like, it's not like, I'm a producer and that's all I, you know, that's all I do. I think we just try and roll up the sleeves and get into the trenches, you know, to have fun, I think, in the end. Like all those narrative elements, there's no way we can do them.
To have fun. If you saw, dear listener, just how tired some of these people are by about this time of the year, which is we're heading towards the end of the year, you're looking at the people in this office are beginning to get sick more often. They're getting really, really tired because of an old fart like me says, the stupidly long hours that they work. But, you know, I mean, that's definitely...
Yeah, well, we haven't killed each other yet, Grant. You know, no one's died.
I think it's come close at times.
Yeah, like during this time, I think that's when fights usually happen.
Yeah.
You know, we don't throw punches, but, you know, words are said.
Things get sort of a little bit short.
They do. Is there one thing, or, you know, it could be multiple things that you're really proud of, like whilst working on Good Game?
On the show? No, because look, it's just a general feeling that this is a very, very nice show to work on. Whenever I work elsewhere in the ABC, if I'm working on other productions, they say, oh, whereabouts are you normally getting most of your work nowadays? And I just say, oh, well, I spend so much of the time on Good Game. The first reaction I get from any other production in this building is, oh, they're such a nice little team, aren't they? And that's pretty true. You know, I mean, there are a bunch of great, hard-working people in this office. But, you know, super magic moments, there's...
Is it hard to quantify, like, being a sound recordist? You know, if you're a DOP, a camera guy, you know, obviously as a producer or director, there's elements that you say, wow, I'm really proud of that. That was really great. But for a sound recordist, is it just consistency? Is it like, basically, if I'm doing my job, you know, like, well, that's that's basically it.
Look, I think, unfortunately, there's one section still on a film set that is black magic to most people. Everybody's got a view on what the food is like. Everybody's got a view on what wardrobe looks like or whether the makeup is stuffed up. Everybody's got a view on whether there should be a shadow there or not a shadow there. And everybody's got a view on what size lens should be used on a shot. There's only one area that pretty well is still black magic to most people on the set, and that's audio. And as far as they're concerned, if they can hear it and if it sounds okay, then they're happy.
Yeah.
There's good audio and there's bad audio, and bad audio, the production always pays for it in post because it costs a lot of money to fix up bad audio that's been wrongly or badly recorded in the first place. Sometimes it's inadvertent, you don't have a choice. But I think my job is more of a case of consistency. I know how the stuff has to cut together. I know that we might be using something here and 5 minutes, a bit of a conversation from here, and in 5 minutes' time on the film set, we'll use another piece of audio, but I know that those two pieces of audio have to cut together so that they occur smoothly. There's a total smooth transition between the two of them so that the viewer does not notice.
Can you, I mean, you know, when I watch anything, I have certain pet peeves in terms of editing or framing or composition. You know, I roughly know what lenses they use, and in terms of blocking, I mean, that's my craft. Can you hear, for example, where the mic is being placed and obviously all the really technical aspects of it? Do you have certain pet peeves when you listen to something?
Look, I don't have certain pet peeves when I listen to something, probably because I'm over it all now. But in the past, yes. I mean, you know, if you're putting radio mics on people, which is very often virtually at the insistence of other departments on the set, when in fact there is no need for it if it was covered properly in the first place. But radio mics go on, and radio mics might go under quite a number of layers of clothing, and it starts getting really, really muffled, and it's so difficult to try and pull clearness in speech out of a muddy sound. So that's quite a peeve to me, that I see productions where they've obviously spent a lot of money in other departments, but they've used perhaps less than what they should have. In the audio.
That's just, I mean, you know, I think I've always discussed with you in terms of using bugs or whatnot, and that all the sound recordists I've worked with would much prefer to boom something than to stick a radio mic on someone, and obviously you get the better fidelity. But a lot of, you know, older and even upcoming producers and also camera people and crew, they don't recognize that, and it's more the ease of use. It's like, oh, if we can put a bug on someone, then they're free to roam, and you know, but sound is often what is thought about last in terms of a production. Does that piss you off?
Again, I'm over getting pissed off about it, but
well, in the past,
but yes, look, I mean, it still does, and it still happens. You know, that you arrive on set and you have a producer immediately telling you how to do your job. And
so all those budding producers out there, you know, be nice to your crew. Always ask for their advice. Be nice to your soundos. I mean, if you think that the job's going to be better done with a radio mic, you don't just demand a radio mic. There are some times where it is inadvertent. I mean, if you're shooting, and this is the bane of all sound recorders around the world, if you're shooting, say, with 4 cameras or 3 cameras, and one of them's on 2 tight singles and one of them is on a wide shot, you cannot get a boom in. But if you were to shoot, this goes back to the days of film, where to have multiple film cameras on set was just prohibitively expensive. So you only had one camera on set. That meant that you did... what you generally did was to do a wide shot first, say of 2 people in a room talking. So you start with a wide shot. You could put a boom in still in there, but it's more of a guide track than anything. So it will sound a little bit bathroomy.
But then you knew that after that, the camera would move around and do what's called a single or a tight single on each of the actors. So the frame size would be from the top of their head to around about their mid-chest somewhere. And that's when you can get the microphone in really, really close. Mm-hmm. And then you turn around and you do it to the other actors. Then you might do a different versions of that. But somewhere along the line, you're well and truly covered in a close angle, getting the absolute best sound. At the meantime, you've also got to look at it from the actor's point of view, that in the wide shot, they're still possibly warming up. They're still in virtual rehearsal. Mm-hmm. So by the time you get to the tight shots, which in fact might have been after even a loose two, perhaps, those actors are in their peak performance. And that's when everybody is happy with what they're getting. You're seeing the facial expressions and the meaning in their words. You're hearing the words at their best. That's when it really clicks together. People say, "Yeah, but it's not going to cut together." Well, that's what good actors do. Good actors are consistent in their performance. That you are able to use the sound from the tight shot and use it over the sound from the really wide shot. Yeah, and nobody will tell the difference.
I've read so many interviews with actors where it's not necessarily about what method class did you come out of, or what teacher did you have, or are you using Stanislavski, are you using Meisner, are you going from the outside in or the inside out? No, the main advice that they give younger actors or people who want to be actors is basically know your lines and hit your marks. And if you've ever been on a film set, that's all you want your actor to do. I mean, obviously, if you've got the time and the money to really get into the performance, then great, you could do 40 takes like Ang Lee does. But if you need to get something in the can and your actor doesn't know their line and can't hit their marks, that's a useless actor.
That's right.
Yeah. I've seen, bigger productions, say, for example, House of Cards, where they use CGI now to get rid of the boom, right? Like, is that a compromise that you think is quite good? Like, you can get the mics in and you just do a plate and then they digitally erase it?
I think, that is a perfect example of skill from all departments working closely together, that the director has an understanding that you've still got to have really good audio there, but understanding what needs to be done, realising that there cannot be a camera movement in a wide shot unless it's a computer-tracked one, so that it allows a plate. So what happens in these is it's a really wide shot of two people talking in a room, and in fact you can actually put a boom in still very, very close over them, and it is in shot. But you cover that by having a shot without the actors in there and of just the room itself, and you slice the top half of that shot off and put it, place it over the top of the shot that you actually want to use with the audio. Therefore, the boom disappears as if by magic. That is a superb use of technology to be able to do that.
I mean, I always I bitch about CGI in films, but that's a great use of CGI. That's like almost the perfect technical use of technology. Some great film making lessons, I think, for everyone in this podcast.
But I also look, I mean, as an example for you real film nuts out there, take the film which is considered a really important film by a lot of people. I think a film that is still admired by a huge number of people, and I believe Spielberg, before he directs any new film, he sits down and rewatches Lawrence of Arabia. And there's a particular shot in that of, I think it's Lawrence in the room with Allenby in a big wide shot in Cairo. And it's a really big, huge stone, reverberant, bathroomy type room. And it's as if it's been shot in the top corner of the room, looking down upon these actors. And it's as echoey as anything. It works for that film, but I'm not sure that the audiences would be prepared to put up with that these days. So, what we were prepared to accept in days gone by wouldn't work today.
Yeah.
They used the sound from that rather than using the tight sound, and it's it's sort of a little bit jarring, but because the rest of the film is so brilliant, you ignore it.
Do you find it frustrating? Say, for example, a lot of films these days, they basically ADR 90% of the audio. Is that frustrating? Is that basically saying, well, it doesn't really matter what we get on set, we're going to ADR this anyway?
I think that there's a lot of...
Sorry, just for people who don't know what ADR is. It's
automatic dialogue replacement.
Yeah. I thought it was additional dialogue replacement. No? Basically what they get the actors to do after they've shot everything is they get them in a room and basically loop footage and get them to re-record their dialogue over their scenes. So they can see their performance in front of them on the screen, and it just loops through and through and through until they get the swing of it, the hang of it. Then they do their lines again. Now, there's two schools of thoughts for actors. There's the actors who passionately hate it, and then there are those actors who economically love it because it means they get more money. Yeah.
But look, ADR, there are times where ADR has to be done and used, and there are times where it's economically they do it. I mean, all those spaghetti westerns from the 60s, they were nearly all ADR. It's nearly... not all, but a huge number of French films and Italian films from the 60s were ADR'd, and that was basically for speed. They didn't have to wait on aircraft. They didn't have to wait on anything. They could just shoot it.
Well, still, pretty much every film from Hong Kong and China ADR'd. Sure. Like some of the really good ones are not, but the great majority, I'd have to say like 90% of everything from television to film to ads are ADR'd, and often horrendously, like just non-matching. Because I don't care, because half the time they're recording in a different dialect, and it has to be mastered in Mandarin or something, so they understand that audiences are used to it and they don't mind. Yeah. I can't stand it.
It's sometimes you see the lips moving at a very, very different rate than what the sound should be.
Or even if it's done like close to the lips, it's still awful because the sound's not right to the space. But then you get someone like my mum or, my dad, they don't care. They don't sense it. Whereas sometimes they're like, oh, this Chinese TV show is really good. You should watch it. I sit down and watch 5 minutes and I'm like, I can't deal with this. Sorry. Like, it actually looks really good right now. The production quality on a visual level is great, but on the sound level is so awful. I can't deal with that. Like,
and there's no, certainly for Hong Kong, there's no reason for that to be like that, because I've done a couple of films in Hong Kong at some of the big studios there, and their studios are wonderful, and we were able to record, 100% dialogue for everything. Yes, if you're outside, it's a different thing, but if you're inside in a studio, and again, that's another thing that should be emphasised, is that the film world is wonderfully adept at being able to make a studio into anything that you want. So you would swear that you were out in the desert, but in fact you're not.
But that's the magic of cinema, really, and that's what we love playing around with. We're talking about the Mafia skit that we did last week, and that was a table, a Venetian blind on a C-stand, and a couple of lights, and that was it. In a corner of the studio, surrounded by a black curtain. But somehow, if we can transport the audience to somewhere different without even them knowing, is, I think, the beauty of what we do. All right. On to the back half of this interview. Now you said that you haven't really played many games. Nope. But do you have a game that takes you to your happy place?
The game that takes me to my happy place is not necessarily a happy place, but it's one that I play so often during the day, is Solitaire.
Solitaire. It's still a great game.
Look, it's mind-numbing. It actually relaxes me. It's there on the iPad. I get a bit embarrassed if I start playing it on the Good Game set.
No one knows. No one judges.
Nobody judges. Yeah. No. But no. Look, there is no other game that I feel. The extraordinary thing is we've reviewed so many games on this show. We've reviewed so many games for iOS devices. And while we're reviewing that, 99% chance that there is an open iOS device on next to my mixer. And the number of times that we've reviewed it, and I've gone straight to the App Store and downloaded that game and looked at it and played it for about 3 minutes and then It sits there forever.
That's great. I'm glad that we're introducing you to more games.
Actually, it's quite funny because there's a little girl who lives next door to us who comes in and visits my wife and I, and she just looks at us. She's only 6, and she looks at us and said, "iPad?" We'll say, "Yep." And she's straight across to the iPad. She knows where the games are on my iPad, and she's straight there, and she's playing the Garden Zombie game.
Plants vs. Zombies. Or
Plants and Zombies, yeah.
Plants vs. Zombies.
She knows exactly. She's there straight away playing the game. Then there's Roller Coaster Sim that we did a review on. She's straight in there playing it. I haven't spent any more than 5 minutes on either of those games, but she knows exactly how to play all those games.
It's great. You're like the free arcade. What a coup. So, because I have to do all the interviews, I get other people to ask me these questions. Yep. So you get to ask me this very important question because it actually pertains, to you as well. You can ask me the second question there.
Yeah, right. Now, I've been asked talk about this being a setup. Lin Jie's obviously written the questions such that she can get the best response out. Okay, Lin Jie, tell me, what's your most memorable and favourite moment of GG?
Okay, so I've talked a lot about obviously liking the narrative elements that we do, like the Bond BC and all those things. And, those are definitely some of my favourite moments. But my ultimate most memorable moment is one that you were a part of, Grant, is I think either my first or second segment I've ever produced for Good Game. And it was the top 5 memorable melodies or top 5 tunes from games. I can't remember. It's been that long. I think it was in 2010 when I was still interning on the show. And back then, Good Game wasn't shot in the big studios down in the ABC. It had its own very small room, probably a little bit bigger than the room we're in right now. And it was actually you couldn't really find an opportunity to visit the big studios, and I had only been in them on the ABC tour when I first started at the ABC in 2009. And I pitched this segment to Janet, and I said, I've written this little segment. It's like the top 5 tunes of gaming. I think Hex would be great at hosting it. She can sing, and she's also done a bit of music as well. And can we possibly get a piano on set? And Janet was like, yeah, sure. Just book the grand piano, try and book a day in the studio. And I was like, the big studio downstairs. She was like, yeah. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. And growing up, wanting to get into production, an absolute dream come true to actually be able to walk into a real television studio with all the lights, and staging had pushed a grand Steinway. It's not that great. Like, it's pretty good, but it was still a Steinway into the studio, and that was, I still think about that moment of walking into the studio and just thinking, wow, this is finally happening. Like, sure, there was a crew of 3 and there was Hex and that was it, but the fact that I was doing this for real and I was getting paid to do it, it was like, well, this is it, right? Like, I don't want to do anything else in my life. And I know that you were sound recording that day, but we were also working with this brilliant DOP, Ian Warburton, or Warby, as you call him. And it was his last shoot of his career at the ABC, which I didn't know at that stage, I think. I was just, excited, I think, to work that day and to direct that day. And it's amazing thinking, 7 years on, I'm still working on the show, but, doing bigger and better things. And yeah, I still have to say that's my most favorite moment of Good Game. And I still say to people, I think these days, whenever you feel, I guess, jaded or bitter, we all get there, right? Is that you walk into the ABC or you walk into the studio and look at what's around you. And I think Goose told me when we did the 10th anniversary special, he just walked around the big studio set and he was like, wow, it sunk in again. It's like, wow, I'm working in television. And for a lot of people, this is like an absolute dream. And for a lot of people, they don't get here as well. And I think it's easy to lose track of that, especially when you've worked on things a long time. But it's always nice to kind of think back and have a chance to look back on what you've done and also where you've come from. So thank you, Grant, for working on my first segment.
It's an absolute pleasure. Yeah. And as a little sort of side issue there, on that day, Warby and I went on to do another shoot, and that was just so childishly puerile. And that was the very, very last thing that Warby did after a career of 40 years here at the ABC. And he said it didn't matter what we did in the afternoon with Lin Jie and the piano and lighting in the big studio, doing minimalist lighting. He said that was just fantastic. I just love doing that so much.
Yeah. So just, pretend that second shoot never happened in the afternoon.
Never happened.
That was, the top 5 tunes was his last shoot.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Grant, for your time.
Lin Jie.
Thank you for, lessons in filmmaking. Would you ever go into teaching?
Nope.
Done and dusted. Well, thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you, Lin Jie.
And that was Grant Roberts. It's been great mining Grant for all sorts of anecdotes about the old days of TV production over the years. He's a guy who's worked on everything and seen almost anything. It's always such a pleasure to work with someone with so much experience. And now, finally, on to Hex. Hex.
Hi.
How's it going?
Pretty good.
What did you have for breakfast today?
Oh my gosh.
Tell me all about it.
So I went to Bondi because my dentist is in Bondi, and Bondi is the home of all the best breakfasts.
Oh yeah.
Possibly in Australia. So I had a winter breakfast bowl that was like some kale, a bit of pumpkin, some falafel, some soft poached egg on top, bit of chili, all the good stuff.
Soft poached eggs, man.
Yeah.
Just soft eggs in general.
I just love eggs.
Oh, so good.
Could never be vegan. But I try to buy eggs from... There's this cool app called Cluck AR, and it's an augmented reality app, and you hold it over the egg carton and it tells you how free range it is, really. Because you can't trust what they say on the box.
Oh, wow. That's very good.
Yeah.
I'm interested in...
I like it when tech combines with,
Is that kind of like...
nature.
That chicken farm that had webcams up?
Yeah,
and you
okay.
could watch them?
So I've been buying those eggs for so long because I'm looking at the chickens on the webcam thinking they're the best. Apparently, they get scored a 1 on a scale of 1 to 10 in the Cluck app.
No.
So I don't know what's going on behind the scenes.
Maybe they just have like 3 chickens that run around in front of the camera, and the rest of the chickens are like
TV chickens, and the rest of them are all cooped up and living miserable lives.
Lies.
I know. I feel cheated.
Oh. It's like when I told you the accents in Crouching Tiger weren't real.
Yeah.
It's okay.
But they're real to me.
It's still a great film. It's still a great film.
Good movie. Don't watch the sequel.
Yeah. Oh, no. I saw the ad for the sequel. Was like, no.
Yeah,
no,
it's
probably
bad.
not.
It's pretty bad.
What was your earliest memory of Good Game?
Like Good Game as a show?
Yeah.
I think the first time I ever remembered watching it, I picked Barjo having been lived. I remember watching it and knowing that Barjo must have lived in New Zealand at some point because I detected a slight New Zealand Kiwi accent. Yeah, because I grew up there as well. So if you have any Kiwi in your past, I will find it. Certain words, certain inflections.
You could just sense the Kiwi in people.
Yeah. But I remember watching it and being like, this is awesome. Like this is such a... It felt like... your people you wanted to be friends with, chatting about stuff that you liked, and that's kind of such a great recipe for a TV show. Yeah.
And now you're on it. And you've been on it for a while.
And now I'm on it.
And now you're on it. Well, that's the thing. Like, I've got a lot of questions from people saying, obviously, you guys are living the dream. You get to play games, and it's like for a lot of people, it's like, wow, you play video games for a living. That's like amazing. But you also have to work as well.
Yeah, I mean, like I think that the TV side of it is the part that puts the most amount of pressure. I think it's not just like my day involves just playing games all day. That we're also making a TV show, and that's where all the kind of stress and the as
that's where the job comes in.
That's where the job comes in. Yeah, and it's there was an interesting article that Mark Serrels wrote actually recently talking about how working in games has kind of hampered his recreational gaming time and the enjoyment that he gets from games. Because I think anytime you turn something that you love into your job, there always is an element of it kind of encroaching into a space where you start to look at it as work and not fun anymore. And I think that happens a little bit with games because you end up anything like that can kind of sort of suck the happiness out of it. So every now and again you have to kind of check yourself and remind yourself that, this is a wonderful art form that you're getting to, enjoy every day. And just because you're playing a lot of it doesn't mean that each one of those experiences taken out of the work concept wouldn't be completely wonderful.
Well, I guess the same thing, same issues that developers face or people who actually go into making games. They love games and they're like, oh, wouldn't it be great if I just make games, like be around games all the time. Yeah. And then very quickly you have to realize that you have to make that compromise between your hobby and your job.
Yeah.
And I'm a huge photography enthusiast, and I have had people say to me, it's like, oh, you should, make that a side career, make that a job of some kind.
You're like, no.
And I'm like, no, it's my hobby.
You want to protect it and keep it sacred and just for you.
And it's sacred, and I don't have to feel any pressure about making money off it or providing a service or dealing with clients or anything. I only do it when I want to do it. And friends want me to take photos or whatever, yes, I'll oblige. But I don't want any of that kind of admin stuff.
Yeah. I mean,
on the side.
There's two sides to the coin. I think, doing this job has really broadened my experience in terms of the kinds of games that I play. My world has been opened up to a whole range of game genres that I probably never would have even looked at had I not started working on this show.
Yeah.
And then I guess the flip side of it is that I play games a little bit differently because there's always a time constraint. So in an open world game, which are my favorite games, are sort of open world RPG experiences, I love to explore and waste time doing silly things, and you don't really have the time to do that when you're reviewing to a deadline. So it changes the experience of playing a game for me a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the flip side of it.
Yeah. So what is your most memorable and favorite moment on Good Game?
I have so many, and some of them aren't even related to kind of games of the show. It's just working together as people, when we've gone away on trips and things, you see another side of people, I think. And every time we've shared a house together, or Barjo's hidden in closets and stuff when we've all been sharing a house, and, he's so wacky and funny, and he loves attention, and he will do whatever he can to get a laugh out of you. And I love those moments. I think probably my favorite moment was when we were in Japan and we were at Tokyo Game Show, and we did that brain kiss romance simulation game. We've showed this clip on the show a bunch of times, but it was just so funny.
Well, it's gone meme now.
Has it? Yeah.
It's gone meme on Imager and stuff.
Yeah. So I mean, so we walked up to this this booth, and they were displaying one of those those headsets that supposedly read sort of brain activity. Yeah. I've seen some with little ears attached, and the movement of the ears apparently is triggered by activity in your brain. So this was kind of a similar thing where they'd written a little piece of software that supposedly was supposed to determine whether you had romantic feelings towards each other, which of course is like just total bullshit, but we thought it would be very funny. So we both we were instructed to put the headsets on and stare into each other's eyes for a full minute of unbroken eye contact.
That's very intimate.
Which is really intense.
That is super intimate, yeah.
And so then at the end of the 60 seconds, we look at the screen, and it comes up with the result that Barjo's like apparently in love with me, but I'm not in love with him, which was very, very funny. And then, of course, the response online was this hilarious thing of poor Barjo, in the friend zone, which is hilarious and stupid, because apart from the fact that I find the concept of the friend zone a bit offensive and dumb, Barjo and I have never had any kind of romantic feelings towards each other. And
I mean, it's very much a sibling relationship.
Yeah. So it was very it's a hilarious thing to see people react that way. It was just it's never been a thing.
It's never been.
It never will
folks.
be a thing. We were both in long-term relationships for a very long time with other people. It's just not. It's not a thing. I wish people would stop saying poor Barjo, because he's not in a situation where he's ever wanted that.
No. I mean, it's funny how much people want to read in to like TV relationships, right? Because obviously, I mean, you put people together because they've got chemistry.
Yeah.
Or, or there's tension there or there's conflict. But how audiences read into that and what is actually reality is like two different things, right?
Yeah.
But speaking about awkward moments, I have a question from Daniel Tan here.
Sure.
What's the most awkward moment to film?
To film?
Yeah. Well, what has been the most awkward moment for you, like whilst filming?
Probably like we've done a few, film inspired pieces, and we've done like romantic inspired scenes of James Bond between like Gus and I and stuff like that. There was a moment where he had to like hold me in his arms, and I was, and have
he had to trip into his arms.
Yeah, that's right. After I just like kicked him down the stairs, but then it was this kind of almost romantic scene between Gus and I, which was quite funny as well because there's a similar kind of thing going on there where we have a very very much a sibling relationship. So even just having your face close to someone's face like that is really intense when you're not used to being that close. It's weird.
And that's the thing.
And you get the giggles and it's just, it's weird.
Well, as a, as a director occasionally, just because you're trying to get the blocking right and, the placement right for camera, I'm always like, okay, can you guys just stand closer? Even closer. So just take another step
in. It's like primary school.
And that's the thing, like,
you don't want to touch.
Yeah, if you're, cooties, if you're a performer though, or if you're actually the person doing that action, it is incredibly confronting and awkward because you're surprisingly close to someone. That you have no right to be that close to. In a way, right? But to make it look proper on camera, like you have to do that.
I think Barjo and I have finally moved past the weird touching thing. I think we now we can like, we can almost touch each other inappropriately in a friendship sense and it's okay. You know what I mean? Like, I think it probably, where we were on a plane once and I think there was some really bad turbulence and like it was just looking kind of dire for a moment and we both just like grabbed each other's hands like in that weird moment of panic where I was just like, we wouldn't normally do this, but this is kind of scary. And then I think we were changed as people after that.
Yeah. It's like you found that connection.
Yeah.
It's odd. Like I've had I think I've mentioned to the Pocket team a couple times that when guys get together, like there's this weird, like a lot of touching going on, but there is a barrier, like, between the sexes, between female and male in that, like, you don't want to be inappropriate at any point in time. But, you go into the Pocket office, they're just touching each other all the time.
They've got their own thing going on in there.
It's funny.
There was, there's like in the Pocket room, John, ladies and gentlemen, his desktop background is a picture of Pete and Nick pretending to make out, which I went in there to like use the computer to like capture some footage. And I was like, what's this?
There's a lot of
where's the source file?
Wait a minute, what are they doing?
It's on my hard drive now.
Yeah. It's on most of our hard drives. Shouldn't it be on the shared drive?
It should be.
Like, right? So a lot of people have also wanted to ask you, in terms of your first days on the show, it was quite difficult, especially with what happened to Jung and everything surrounding that. Like, I mean, how was it for you going through that?
It's weird. Like I feel like I've spoken about this more this year than ever because I feel like I'm finally now at a point where I can talk about it and it's not a big deal and everyone's kind of moved on.
You can look back to it with more perspective and
it was really tough. I totally recognize that at the time the majority of the backlash was because people were upset at the removal of Jung and not necessarily at me. However, their chosen method of expressing their outrage was to, say horrible sexist things to me and make my life very...
Well, it's like they've never met you in person.
Yeah.
They don't see you as that kind of human being who's kind of stepped in. Like.
Yeah. I think, already, being the first kind of, female lead host on the show, I had a lot to prove to people who just felt like I didn't belong there. But to also be replacing someone that they loved who, was, left not of their own volition, it was then this kind of tripled down trial by fire of trying to prove to everyone that I could do the job and to just try and wade through all of this hate and backlash. It was tough. But I think at the end of the day, my love and passion for the job meant that I wanted to keep doing it in spite of all that. Because what were my alternatives, to not do it, to leave.
Yeah. But, I mean, you didn't have any options, right? And I remember, and Janet talking about this on her episode of the podcast is that, what she said to you was basically you do the job as best as you can.
Yeah.
And then, people will recognize that.
And the reason why when they were sort of looking to just bring someone on, even just for Spawn Point, was because Janet recognized the need to have a bit more female representation on the show. The intention was never to remove Jung initially. There was stuff that went on between him and the ABC that was entirely separate from me. But she recognized the necessity to have, a woman on the show, and that has then proven itself to be, quite integral in the sense that so many women and young girls approach me at conventions now saying how great it is to see someone, to represent women in an environment that has a history of being very male dominated. So I feel very proud to have been that person, and I feel very lucky that the audience has grown and expanded and been able to embrace my presence, because it's been such an incredible journey for me as well.
Yeah. And I mean, diversity and representation shouldn't even be questioned at this point in time, right?
Oh, for sure.
People should just do it.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, other than that, and what you've talked about, what is something that you're most proud of, coming through Good Game after all those years?
I think I didn't...
Oh, after all these years.
Yeah. I think, what I didn't realize, even until I took the job was that... And the reason why I never really looked at getting involved in television presenting, and I was studying acting and things like that, was because I didn't realize that you could present and produce at the same time.
Yeah.
I didn't think that was an opportunity that would be made available to me until I joined the ABC. And I realized that, everyone who works on shows here is so involved in the production process. So to be able to play and review the games myself and to write content for the show makes me so much more invested in the end result rather than just being a talking head on screen, and I feel very proud to have contributed to how many hundreds of episodes I've been a part of now, and those reviews forever exist now as part of the history of the show and the work that I've done, and I feel really grateful to have learned so much from the other people on the team, because you pick up something new every day from the collective experience of the whole Good Game team, and I feel very lucky to have been a part of it. And
it's something about ownership of your creative work, right?
Yeah.
It's like if you've, done a painting or a drawing or written a song, it's like that is your creative output, and you've put your, time and your energy into it. Recently you've done Fan with Hex, and you also directed a short film. Yeah, wow. Within that series,
wasn't that an eye-opening learning experience?
And I know that you've been you've taken a few editing classes as well.
Yeah.
I mean, is that something that you're interested in, or becoming more interested in? Is that behind the scenes stuff?
Definitely, because as soon as we the way we make reviews for the show is that we record all of our game footage, and then after we've written the review, we go back through the log of all of that footage. And we literally will write the time codes for every single clip of footage that we want to use to demonstrate what we've discussed in the review. And so then that has given us the opportunity to choose, specific moments and clips and put things together. And you start to get a sense of, the editing process, even just from being involved in that small way. And while I have a long way to go, I certainly have a new respect. Again, you develop a new respect every time you try to do something for yourself.
Yeah.
I've watched the editors for years putting things together, and as soon as I started doing it for myself, I was like, wow, this is really a lot harder than it looks. It's it's one thing to point and say, put this there or do that, or maybe make this look cool, but to then start to try and, artfully put something together yourself. But it does, because it does make you want to learn those things for yourself and be more involved, because you see how much something can be transformed and how much you can change a message or a story or the way something is conveyed by the way you design it and put it all together.
My question is, directing your short film, did it make you appreciate what producers and directors do?
Oh my God, yes. Just being Because the sole responsibility for everything that happens ultimately is then on your shoulders.
Yes.
And I never really considered that. And, you know, there was so often as a presenter or being someone who's on screen, you're constantly just all you're ever thinking about is your own part in that production. Yeah. This is what I have to say. That's what I have to do. And I'm only really thinking about this when I'm standing there doing my thing. And then every other time you know, you're just kind of like, well, that doesn't involve me. When you're directing it, you're involved in every single part of the process. You're 100% involved. And that's it kind of gives you a sense of energy and excitement because you don't have any downtime or you don't have time to sort of stop and not be thinking about it. But like we were running out of time, and I knew that if we went into overtime it was going to cost money because for every moment you go into overtime you're paying all of these people and the stress of that was so intense. Plus I could see the looks on the actors' faces as I was asking them to do more takes, and that's been my face so many times, and I'm like, oh come on, I said I couldn't be here past 5 and it's 5:05 and I know that we've still got 4 scenes to go and I'm giving people death stares, and suddenly I was on the receiving end and I was like, we can't not finish the film, we don't have another day, like what do you want me to do, like we're gonna stay late. So I had this suddenly, it was like this profound epiphany of what it is like.
Did it surprise you how much of that process is decision making, because everyone's coming to you for you to make the decisions, like yes, no, or whatever.
And Ben the director, he was a producer of How to Be a Fan, but he also he's directed Good Game for many years, and I, you know, he's done a lot of directing work and film and things like that over the years. So I would look to him all the time, but he was very much about like you're on your own for this, and he because that was the experience, right? I was supposed to be kind of learning for myself, and so I would look to him with this face of like, do I need to get this from another angle, or do these two things make together? And he would kind of just shrug and be like, I don't know, man, it's your film. And I was like, oh, come on, help me out. I don't know how to do this at all. And just you could see people, I could feel people getting frustrated with my inexperience, even though they knew the position that I was in. We had this wonderful DOP, Steve Munro, and he was offering so many wonderful suggestions, but there were times when I was just like, so what do we need to do now? He's like, well, I don't know, what do you want to do? I can give you some suggestions is this the kind of mood you want? And I was like, I guess so. I don't know. I don't know. So it was amazing.
I think half the time of that job is basically committing to a decision even if you don't know what you're doing.
What I think I learned from that whole process, and you know, from what I understand of directing, is there are some directors who are very involved in the visual look of each shot, and there are some directors who want to work exclusively with getting a certain performance out of the actors. I think I'm the latter. I really enjoyed that part, I suppose from the whatever small experience I have from acting in theatre and stuff. I really enjoyed working with actors to try and elicit a certain performance out of them or convey to them what I thought the scene should be. But in terms of setting up shots and making things look good, I don't have a lot of talent there. So I'm happy to work with a really good director of photography to be like, how about we do it from this angle and we shoot with this kind of light and that will make that look really powerful. And I'm like, good job, let's do that.
Good job. I mean, the interesting thing about the technical points of directing is that's very much a learned craft. Like, whereas some directors never learn how to work with actors. So the good thing is you know, if you get the actor thing down, you know, the framing and stuff, that's all technical, and you learn that as you go, and you learn that by watching more films and analyzing stuff. So I mean, that's a good thing, you know, you're well on your way. Do you have, I feel like I know the answer to this question, do you have a game that takes you to your happy place?
I have a few. I mean, the game that I've said 1,000 times is my favorite game of all time is The Witcher 3, because that whole series really is, you know, I have a history of you know, loving fantasy fiction and reading, and that game really is all of the books that I've ever loved brought to life, and it gives me every possible, you know, experience I could want out of a video game. So I love it. It gives me fantastic story, exploration, really traditional medieval like fantasy, just nerdy, classical fantasy, which I love, and just the freedom to explore it, you know, in my own way. But I think also the first game that I ever really became passionate about was the mud that kind of got me into gaming, Lensmore. And I have such wonderful sort of teenage memories attached to that whole experience that would definitely be my happy place as well. Even though I can't, it's kind of in a time time bubble, that game. I can't really go back to it and get the same experience.
Well, we were discussing Westworld, and you were talking about MUDs, and you had so much knowledge about MUDs. Like, I mean, it's not a genre that I've ever played. It was a huge
chunk of my life.
And it was just like so fascinating listening to you talk about it, because it was like another world. It was like, oh wow, like I'd never played a game like that, but it felt like so rich.
It's like a secret society. It's a little bit like Second Life in the sense that you are living a kind of a living, breathing world in another in a whole other personality in a whole other life. And other people are doing the same thing, and you all kind of make up the fabric of this world together. And that's what makes it so rich and so unlike any other gaming experience.
I'll bring them back. So just to finish off, what does good game mean to you?
It's my family now, I suppose, and has been for a long time. I guess everything in my life is kind of connected to Good Game in some way. I met all my friends through the show. I met my partner through this show. Everything that I kind of invest time and care into is connected to the show. So it really is the kind of main pillar of my life right now. And I think, when you work on something that is so consuming, that is kind of a necessity or an unavoidable byproduct.
It's like production, isn't it?
Yeah. So I guess it's kind of my family, and it's nice to be part of something where everyone is so genuinely committed to, producing something that everyone is just really passionate about.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hex.
Oh, thank you.
It's been amazing to see how Hex has cultivated and developed within the Good Game community after a particularly brutal start, but that's testament to her perseverance and hard work over the years. Still to come on the last episode of Humans of Good Game, 4 interviews filled with insight, reflection and hilarity. As always, if you have a comment or question, tweet me at LJology or leave a comment on SoundCloud or Facebook. You can also subscribe to this podcast through iTunes or listen through SoundCloud. I'm Lin Jie Kong. Till next time, goodbye.